as we're entering our keynote speech for the day, folks, I'm very, very pleased to welcome somebody that has been a huge inspiration in my own research, my own academic work in social psychology that has come all the way from the United States during his visit in Ireland. So I'm very pleased to welcome as our keynote speaker today, Professor John A. Powell, who is an internationally recognized expert in areas of civil rights, civil liberties and structural racism, housing, poverty, and democracy. He is the director of the Othering and Belonging Institute at the University of California, Berkeley, a research institute that brings together scholars, community advocates, communicators, and policymakers to identify and eliminate barriers, eliminates the barriers to an inclusive, just, and sustainable society. John is an author of several books, including Othering Without Belonging, How We Save Ourselves and the World, and the forthcoming The Power of Bridging, How We Can Build a World Where We All Belong. I'm pleased to welcome John as our keynote speaker today.
So, good morning. You know, I used to dance. And rumor has it I might dance again, but not today. So it's a delight to be here. I know these are great times, but they're also challenging times. There's a lot of things to be done. And there's a lot of wonderful people doing wonderful work, including the people here. And, you know, I've been asked by a couple of people, why am I here? First of all, I have staff here, two Sarahs. Sarah does a forum on democracy and belonging in Europe, and other Sarah is our director of development. And the forthcoming book, The Power of Bridging, is now out. So I encourage you to get that, and I'll talk a little bit about that today. So I'm going to introduce some concepts, and if you know, I have about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and if there's some concept that you just don't understand or can't or don't agree with, stop me, because I do want this to be a dialogue. This is really to support your work and to support you. So we know about racism, we know about xenophobia, we know about sexism, we know about ageism, we know about. What we know about is othering. All of those processes are saying to people, you don't really belong in this space. You're not really one of us. And even sometimes when we try to be magnanimous and say, welcome in, we still invite people in as a guest. We still basically say, this is my space, but you can come in for a while. And then if there's difficulty, if the economy turns, if there's an incident, it's like, well, you don't belong here anymore. That's othering. And that's a problem that's not just happening in Ireland, in Belfast, in Dublin. It's happening all over the world. And there are many ways in which we say to people that you don't belong. And this is what's called the stereotype content model. It's looking at how warmly we feel towards someone and how smart we think they are. And so when we think someone's really smart and really warm, that's the gold standard. That's our people. My people are smart and warm. They can dance, they can cook. They're just cool. And then sometimes we think people we feel warmly towards someone, but we don't think they're very competent. So it's my uncle, who now has lost a few steps. I still love him, but I wouldn't let him write my books. I wouldn't let him teach my class. He's not with it anymore. So that's the othering, but it's a different kind of othering. I still love him, but it's just not fully competent. And then the people who are very smart, but not only can't they dance, they never could dance. And these people in the United States, we can test to see where people fall on this axis. And on this axis, the competent but not warm, in the United States, those are the Asians. We say, yeah, they're good at math, they're good at physics, they can maybe even build robots, but they're not cool. They're not the people you really want to have a party with. So those people we envy. And then finally, there's a group of people that we feel like they're not competent and we don't like them. And it's different for every group because these are all sociological phenomena. It's different for every country and it's different at different times. So in Ireland, this test has been done and they find that Romas or travelers fall in this category. We don't like them, you don't like them as a society, and you don't think they're very competent. And when you don't like someone and don't think they're very competent, strange things happen. Nature thought it would be kind of cool if we recognize our fellow species. So when you see another human being, there's a part of the brain that lights up. It doesn't mean you're going to buy them coffee. It doesn't mean you're going to take them home. It just means another human being, hey. You might not even say hey, but your unconscious registers you've seen another human being. You know, if we were like dogs, we'd go up and smell each other, but we're not dogs, at least most of us. When someone is deeply othered, when someone is considered not very smart, and we don't like them, when we see those people, that part of the brain does not light up. So for you, that means when you see Romas as society, not as individuals, there's a part of your brain that doesn't register them as human beings. And when someone is not seen as a human being, you can't develop policies for them. They're not deserving. They're the other. They're not just different. They're considered a threat. And so part of the thing is, how do we actually shift that? And one of the ways we shift that is through curiosity. So we can connect people to a machine so we can measure the brain waves. So in the United States, they did an experiment on a group that's the other, not liked, not competent, homeless people. And they're watching homeless people, and the part of the brain that registers as a human being is completely quiet. And then they say, what kind of vegetables do you think those homeless people like? All of a sudden, that part of the brain explodes. We become curious. And all of a sudden, we see them as human beings. But normally, when we see the other, what kind of vegetables do Romas and travelers like? We don't think of them as liking vegetables. We don't think of them as having feelings. We don't think of them as caring about their children. We don't think about them as having pets. We don't think about them as being like us. So part of it is to open up our curiosity. And that's partially what this is about today. How do we open up our curiosity about each other? So when we decide someone is the other, we break with them. We literally break our connection as a human being. And in doing our breaking, we don't just not notice them, we actually tell stories about them. Let me just ask, how many of you have heard stories about travelers or Romas as you were growing up? Show of hands. Okay, question. Did any of those stories tell you what kind of vegetables they like? That's not the stories we tell. That's breaking. There's another kind of relationships which is called bonding, social cohesion. This is sort of interesting. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but just to say, when I was growing up, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, they would often say, well, you know, black people over here and white people over there, it's natural for people to be with their own. I said, so how do you define your own? There's a friend of mine who wrote a book called Far From the Tree. And he writes about being different than the other family members. So he's gay, Andrew Solomon. And he grew up in a family where he was the only gay person. He has dyslexia. So they're all Jewish, they're all white, but that didn't create a bond. And so he was saying, sometimes, even in your family, you fall far from the tree. So what's his group? Is this group Jews? Is this group people with dyslexia? Is this group gay people? And it depends. When you persecute someone, that actually is more likely to define a bond. So in the United States, because African Americans are attacked as African Americans, there's a bond between other African Americans. And it's strange in some ways, because I'm here in Ireland and Europe, and it's shifted some. But in the United States, when a black person sees another black person, just like nature, we acknowledge them. Just say, hey. Walking around here, I see black people, I say, hey, and they just keep walking. It's like, what's up with that? I thought we had a bond. The bond is not natural. Our bonds are socially constructed. There's no natural bond. There's no natural group we belong to. And that's important because that means we can also create new bonds. If it was driven by nature, we'd be stuck with the bond that we created. Belonging. What do we mean by belonging? Well, good news and bad news. Actually, good news and good news. The good news is, I'm not going to tell you. The good news is, it's in my book. No, you know what belonging is. All of us have a sense of, you know, sometimes we show up in a place like, whoa, not my place, not my people. When can I leave? How did I get here? And other times we all say, yes, I can exhale. This is where I belong. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to justify myself. I don't have to perform. And when I say something, people pay attention to it. Belonging is not an abstraction. We're born physically attached to another human being. And we cut the physical umbilical cord, but we cannot and should not ever try to cut the spiritual umbilical cord. At the Other End Belonging Institute, we talk about the circle of human concern. The circle of human concern. The circle of human... Who's in that circle? Who's in that circle of human concern? Who deserves our attention? And some people challenge me and say, why is it just humans? Why are we just concerned about humans? What about the earth? I say, you're right. In fact, human comes from the word humus, which means of the earth. We are of the earth. And a lot of the problems we're having today is because we tried to cut the cord with the earth. We don't realize we are of the earth. Indigenous people all around the world realize that, and we think they're speaking metaphorically when they talk about Mother Earth. They're not speaking metaphorically. They're saying we are of the earth. And you have to treat your mother well. So how do we actually recognize that there's no one outside the circle of human concern? I'm concerned about you. I'm concerned about you. I don't even know you, but I'm concerned about you. And I'm concerned about you. And yet, through our language, through our stories, through our cultures, we are constantly saying, we're concerned about people on this side, but people on that side, they're not so cool. Because, I don't know, let me just make up something. You're wearing a hat. Oh, you show up with a hat? I can't believe you show up to this thing with a hat. You showed up without a hat? Oh, I can't believe that. So we tell stories to reconfigure, to say some people matter and some people don't matter. When George Floyd was killed in the United States, we came out, Black Lives Matter. You know, and it's like, I don't know about you here in Ireland, but when you go to a neighborhood and they say, this is a drug-free zone, I say, okay, this is a drug market, right? Because you don't put up those signs unless there's a problem with drugs. So you don't say Black Lives Matter unless you're saying you're addressing a problem where Black lives don't matter. So there are all kind of environmental signals to whether or not you belong, whether or not this is your place. So for example, let's say you're trying to get in this building and you're in a wheelchair. Are there elevators? If there are no elevators, by design, we've said to the person in a wheelchair, you don't belong. Some of you know I fly way too much. Leaving here today, going to Belfast, and then I'm coming back, and then I'm flying to the United States, and then I'm coming back to Germany, and that's all within a week period of time. Way too much. And so when you get on a plane, notice this. There are luggage racks overhead. overhead. So there's some part of the population that tends to be shorter than the other part of the population. That same group has less upper body strength. Who am I talking about? Women. And women as a group, and I know this is somewhat controversial, but I think the data sustains it. Women as a group are more likely to carry luggage than men. So here they come with their luggage, and they have to lift it up over their head. It's like they're going to the gym. Okay, I'm just going to check my luggage. When you check your luggage, you have to be there 45 minutes earlier. And when you leave 45 minutes later, sometimes without your luggage. So women are being taxed by that design. So designs matter, environments matter, institutions matter. We're doing some work with IKEA, and I was on a call with IKEA the other day, a video call, and I have a temporary flat in Berlin. And the guy on the other end from IKEA, he said, I noticed you have IKEA furniture. And I said, you're right. Did you also notice that all the furniture is too small? I'm expecting some real furniture one day to come at the flat. The point is that someone designed that furniture for a little person. And I'm not against little people, but I'm not a little person. So designs matter. How we structure things matter. And when I made this slide, I just heard about the Congolese man who had been killed. And even as we're sort of getting ready to come talk to you, find out that there are riots or protests or whatever you want to call them, disturbances in Belfast. So these things are happening all over. And when I heard about the Congolese man who was suffocated, I couldn't help but think about George Floyd. Are we doing this again? And are we saying to the Congolese gentleman, George Floyd, your life does not matter? Are we saying to black people, your life does not matter? Are we saying to old people, your life does not matter? So othering is basically saying to people, your life, your group does not matter as much as some other group. And that's what we have to change. And it's not just a problem in the United States, it's a problem in Ireland. Now, so one of the ways we try to fix this is with inclusion. So you can recognize exclusion, where you keep people out, stop them at the border, arrest them. Another is where you let people in. But you let them into something that they have no capacity to influence or change, right? So you say, this is how we do stuff in Ireland. Glad you're here. You know, we don't recognize Allah in Ireland. We don't recognize people dressed in a certain way in Ireland. We don't recognize hats. We don't recognize scarves. And if you want to be here, you have to conform. One of my favorite writers was James Baldwin. And James Baldwin, at the height of his literary career, he took his craft. He was an artist. He was a savant. If you haven't read him, do yourself a favor, buy any book by him. And when he's at the height of his literary career, he was invited to join this very esteemed literary club. And he was delighted because he cared about his craft. And they said, Mr. Baldwin, happy to have you join us. You can write. I mean, it took them a long time to figure that out, but they finally acknowledged you can write. So come join our club. And it was in New York. And he said, but you know what? You hang out with a lot of ruffians up in Harlem, which translates into black people. He said, they're not really welcome in our club. And you know what? We don't really care that you're gay, but can you not talk about it? And he said, no, thank you. He wrote a book called The Price of the Ticket. And he said the price of membership was too high. They were telling me to mutilate myself, and then I could belong. That's not belonging. So when we talk about inclusion, too often inclusion is the cost of mutilation. We tell people, you're included on our terms. That's not belonging. Belonging is where you co-create the thing you're joining. You have a hand, you have a voice, you have agency. So belonging is more than inclusion. It requires co-creation. It requires recognizing that the person or the group that's coming is bringing something with them that you need to dialogue with, that you need to engage with, that you need to talk to. And yes, it's going to change them, and it's going to change you. So, who do I belong to? Our identities are fluid. I have multiple identities. We all have multiple identities. Those identities keep changing. I was talking to Sarah on the way over, known Sarah for a little while now, and I knew her when before she had kids. And she's still Sarah, but it's a different world with kids. She's telling me about hiking the Alps with the kids, with her child, Anton. Hope you don't mind me sharing this, Sarah. And it's like, what am I doing up here? Get me off this mountain. So engaging with a kid, without a kid, it's not a new identity. Being a parent. You know what they say? Having children makes things apparent. So once things become apparent, they're different. Our thoughts are different. It's like in the United States, like, let's go to the suburbs and have a kid. You know, it's like, no, I'm not going to the suburbs, even though I have a kid. So the thing is, we're constantly changing. And so when we build structures and belonging, we're not building it for a single identity, we're building it for multiple identities. And one of the ways we build those spaces for belonging is with stories. Stories are incredibly important. So those of you who know communication know that narrative and stories are important. But stories are not factual. Stories are about meaning. Stories tell us why something is important. Stories tell us why we're important or not important. And there are different types of stories. There are bridging stories and breaking stories. There are stories to say, stories about the Romans, and then there's the Roman story. The Roman story, I'll bet you a dime to a donut, tells you what kind of food they eat. Stories about them doesn't tell you that. So we have to tell stories and invite people to tell their own story. But we have to be curious about their story. Okay, so this is one of the provocations. I'm giving you 3 provocations. One of them is bridging, connecting with the other person who is apparently different. The other one is to learn a new language. So, how many of you speak lizard? Okay, I see about 2 hands. All right, so all of you, this is your assignment for the next year. Learn to speak lizard. So what is lizard? Well, the brain is a complicated organism. It's actually multiple organisms, and it's evolved over time. And the oldest part of the brain is called the amygdala. And it's the same part of the brain that we share with the lizard. And what the amygdala does is it activates fear and anxiety. So when we're afraid, it's the amygdala that's the most important part of the brain. Also, the amygdala is very fast. Now, the amygdala, if we were on the planet for 24 hours as humans, the amygdala would show up at the first hour. So it's 23 hours, 30 minutes old. The newer part of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex. So the amygdala is back here, the back of the brain. The prefrontal cortex is like between your eyes. The prefrontal cortex is what you're processing now. It's logical, it's analytical, it's factual. But if we've been around for 24 hours, the prefrontal cortex has been here for 5 minutes. And it's very slow. So the prefrontal cortex is slow. So when something happens and you need a quick reaction, it's not the prefrontal cortex. It's the other parts of the brain that act. So when we are afraid, it is the amygdala that's active. And how do we engage the amygdala? We engage the amygdala with the proper kind of stories. Not facts, Not a new study, not a survey. The amygdala doesn't care about that. Now, if you don't believe me, next time you're in a desert, take your newest study and take it up to a lizard and say, what do you think about this new study on race in Ireland? Watch what the lizard does. I give the example sometimes of a child. When a child is afraid, the amygdala is acting. So you tell a child go to bed at night, and they're afraid that there's a monster under the bed. What does the parents do? Well, one parent will come in and say, Sally, turn the light off and shut the door. You're wasting electricity. And Sally says, no, Mom, there's a monster under the door, under the bed. And the mom, engaging her prefrontal cortex, say, let's look under the bed, Sally. Now, Sally, do you see a monster? And Sally's thinking, how the hell did I get these parents? Everybody knows a monster disappears when you turn on the light. And then the mom says, now turn off the light and shut the door and go to bed. And Sally doesn't sleep a wink at night because that monster comes right back. So the mom engaged at the prefrontal cortex, Sally is engaging at the lizard level. How do you talk to the lizard? One of the things you do, you acknowledge what they're saying. You're afraid, Sally. And how many of you have been afraid and someone says, don't be afraid? Yeah, that works. I'm glad you suggested that. So you have to learn, we all have to learn to talk to the lizard. And I just be upfront, I said it to the reporter, I don't know if she's still here, but I have very little respect for the President of the United States. But one thing he does extremely well, he knows lizard language. He can talk to the lizard. So he talked to people about their fears, and they feel seen. And when we come along and says, you know what? You believe people are stealing your cats and cooking them? That's stupid. Now, how do you think they feel? They feel disregarded. They feel other. They feel like you take their fear and you belittle them. You think they're stupid. Now, it is kind of stupid to think, but that's a different story. You need to engage with the lizard. And if we want to fit into the world, we have to build the world. The world is not there. We have to use our agency. We have to make the world we want to see. All of us. The world for all of us. And that requires agency. And it requires embodiment and capacity. And it requires institutional arrangements. Now think about this. When the UK, or Britain I should say, decided to exit from the European Union, it affected not only your economy, it affected your identity. It affected how you travel. So institutions matter. So how do we build institutions that support belonging without othering? Does anyone know what this is? Where this is? Okay, this is a map of Northern Ireland. And what the blue dots and green dots represent is how long people live. And the blue dots live, on average, 5 years longer than the green dots. And the blue dots are the Protestants in Northern Ireland, and the green dots are the Catholics. We actually structure opportunity physically. Where you live determines how long you live. And this is true in the United States. If you go to an area that's overwhelmingly black, people live a shorter period of time, even people who are not black. We structure opportunity so we can design belonging physically. So we have to pay attention to that. So institutions can actually help us heal, or they can exacerbate the problem. So what are the institutions that are needed to change to create true belonging in Ireland today? How do we build a bigger we? So when we keep breaking with people, there's a Leonard Cohen line which says, you who leave everything that you cannot control, it starts with your family, and soon it comes around to your soul. So there are people in the world who are breaking. We call them conflict entrepreneurs. They trade on conflict, they trade on fear, and they're very good at engaging the amygdala. And they're powerful. And that's what we're seeing happening in the world today. And it's happening in part because we see change happening. And change is hard for us to process, all of us. We can only process so much change in a short period of time without experiencing stress. There's some data that suggests that if you change your primary partner, where you live, and your job in a 2-year period of time, your chance of having a heart attack goes up 50%. And that's assuming you got a good partner out of the deal. If you got a bad partner, you're already done. But the point is that all of us can only process so much change in a short period of time. And what's happening is the world is speeding up. And one of the big changes we're experiencing is demographics. And so I'll say this about that. When people are afraid of change, it's not enough to just say they're racist. All of us have anxieties. All of us have fears. All of us have a breaking point. But just like the monster under the bed, to say there's no monster under the bed is disrespectful, actually. It doesn't move anyone. We need to speak lizard. So we need to bridge. And if we can't bridge, don't break. So if you can't talk to someone, if you can't engage with someone, that's okay. But don't dehumanize them. Don't belittle them. Don't deny their humanity. And what we're trying to create, what we have to create, which is belonging without othering. Every group creates belonging, but then it says, my group belongs, yours don't. So the challenge is for us to say, everyone belongs. There's no other. We have differences, but it doesn't amount to otherness. And this is one of the books, Belonging Without Othering, which if you want to get a copy, see Sarah. But the more recent book is The Power of Bridging. And again, one of the ways we speak the language of the lizard is we speak it from the heart. So I ask, not what's your position on X, but how do you feel? What are you afraid of? And I listen. And listening doesn't mean I agree with you. It doesn't mean you're right. It doesn't mean I don't have my own values, but I'm willing to listen to you. I'm willing to see you, even though apparently you're different, even though some of you came here today without a hat. Thank you.